It was just part of the game. I think the refs had a lot to do with that. It was a build-up for a couple of years now of them just not protecting, the star player of the WNBA, and so
Sophie Cunningham's jaw-dropping revelation has ignited a WNBA firestorm. After a shocking elbow incident, the fearless star is unleashing a torrent of truth, exposing the refs' hidden agenda in a scandal that's rocking the league. Her blistering accusations have fans roaring and insiders reeling. What really happened on that fateful play? Why are the officials dodging accountability? Buckle up as we dive into this electrifying saga, unraveling Cunningham's explosive claims and the seismic fallout threatening to reshape the WNBA forever. Indiana's battle for survival. Indiana didn't just limp into Minnesota. They arrived on fumes, carrying a roster so thin it looked more like a preseason scrimmage than a late-season playoff push. The energy inside the arena felt heavy, as if everyone already knew this wasn't going to be a normal game. When nearly half of your core rotation is gone before the opening tip, survival becomes the only strategy left. The Fever's season has been haunted by injuries in a way that feels almost unreal. Caitlyn Clark, the star who draws headlines wherever she goes, has been sidelined for weeks with no clear timeline for a return. Sydney Colson fell to an ACL tear, Aari McDonald was lost to a fractured foot, and Sophie Cunningham's campaign ended abruptly with an MCL injury. Then came the news about Chloe Bai, ruled out just hours before the game with a knee issue. What was meant to be precautionary soreness only deepened the sense that this team was unraveling by the day. But here's the thing about basketball. It doesn't stop for sympathy. When the roster thins, the demands only grow heavier. Kelsey Mitchell, once tasked mainly with scoring, suddenly became the heartbeat of every possession, juggling the roles of scorer, leader, and floor general all at once. Sophie Cunningham, before her injury, had already been pushed into a do-it-all role, guarding bigger players, initiating plays, spacing the floor, whatever the night demanded, and when those names disappeared from the lineup, someone else had to carry the torch. Take Odyssey Sims, for instance. She wasn't just a late signing, she was a hardship emergency pickup. Straight out of recovery and thrown directly into the fire, she represented the definition of patchwork solutions. These weren't creative lineup choices, they were desperate survival calls, and the cost showed on the court. Every drive required more energy, every rotation felt half a step slower, and every single mistake carried the weight of the season. Fans couldn't help but wonder, how much longer can a team survive like this? Could Indiana still claw out wins with nothing but grit, tape, and sheer willpower? Or is this the kind of season where even the most loyal supporters start counting days to next year? One thing's certain, this isn't just basketball anymore. It's exhaustion, resilience, and stubborn defiance all rolled into one. And sometimes that fight is more gripping than any scoreboard. But what's really putting the Indiana Fever's playoff hopes on the line this season? Stay with us to find out. Indiana Fever's season of survival. The Fever didn't just walk onto the court, they stumbled in, patched together, and were running on fumes long before the first buzzer. By late August 2024, what was supposed to be a competitive season had devolved into a relentless carousel of injuries, emergency signings, and makeshift rotations. Chappelle had been signed midweek and tossed straight into game action without even settling in with the team. Odyssey Sims, still working her way back to full strength, had no choice but to shoulder the brunt of possessions she shouldn't have had to carry alone. Aerial Powers, another last-minute addition, was thrust into heavy minutes before she had the chance to understand the team's rhythm. This wasn't strategy. It was basketball stitched together with duct tape and determination. When teammates are still learning each other's instincts mid-game, flow is impossible. Opponents like the Minnesota Lynx, a team built on continuity and trust, didn't need introductions. They saw the gaps and pounced immediately. Every switch, every trap, every mismatch became a glaring target. Indiana wasn't playing chess. They were scrambling to prevent the board from collapsing under pressure. Head coach Stephanie White called it physical. but anyone watching knew it was more like trench warfare. Possession after possession demanded grit over grace, muscle over finesse. Even so, Kelsey Mitchell refused to flinch. Against collapsing defenses and suffocating traps, she found daylight where none existed. Her 26 points weren't just numbers, they were a message. If this team needs carrying, I'll carry it. But even brilliance has a ceiling. No matter how much one player shines, the cracks in a roster patched together on the fly eventually become impossible to hide. The speculation only adds to the drama. Fans are asking if someone like Sophie Cunningham, a player known for toughness, intelligence, and adaptability, could have made the difference. Could her presence on the wing have lifted some pressure off Mitchell? Could her energy and court vision have patched one of the many holes in Indiana's sinking ship? These are all questions steeped in rumor and what if, but in a season this brutal, they feel louder than ever. At this pace, Indiana might finish the year with a roster unrecognizable from the one that tipped off months ago. Even the replacements, signed on hardship deals, are now battling injuries themselves. Calling it a season from hell almost feels understated. And then there's the officiating controversies, pouring gasoline on an already blazing fire. Yet through it all, one truth remains: the fever fight. And sometimes, in a season this chaotic, that fight becomes the most compelling part of the story. But what happens when a tough play sparks chaos and controversy? Stay tuned, when tough play turns into something else. So, here's the sequence. Sophie Cunningham is locked in, doing exactly what coaches dream of: disciplined defense, steady hands, no shortcuts. Then, in a blink, Kayla McBride swings through, and her elbow crashes across Sophie's face. We're not talking incidental brush here. This was head contact, loud and clear. Sophie drops hard. The crowd gasps. Everyone expects the whistle to stop play, to call for review, to bring accountability. Instead, the whistle goes against Sophie. The defender who took the elbow somehow became the guilty party. The fever bench froze. Cunningham didn't argue. She just glared, that cold, burning look that speaks louder than words. What followed was almost worse than the call itself. Yes, a review came. But the adjustment felt half-hearted, like officials admitting a mistake without daring to hold McBride fully accountable. The penalty still landed on Indiana. Sophie had taken the blow, needed time to recover, yet the Fever were punished. Pain without protection, punishment without justice. And that wasn't just a bad moment. It was the kind of turning point that breaks a team's rhythm, tilts the floor, and makes an uphill battle nearly impossible. Fans weren't quiet about it either. Social media lit up instantly, not just because of this play, but because the whole scene felt like a script fans have seen far too often. The pattern is hard to ignore. Indiana players hit the deck, absorb contact, get shoved or struck, and yet the whistle seems to bend the other way. Call it perception, call it bias, but the consistency of it stings. And when half your roster is already in street clothes from injuries, those missed whistles aren't just lost possessions. They're added risks, piling injury on top of injury. That's the cost Indiana cannot afford. Physicality isn't the problem. Everyone knows postseason level basketball gets rough. But that's exactly why officiating is supposed to exist, to draw the line between tough and reckless. On this night, the guardrails seemed optional. Fever guards took hit after hit without whistles, while lighter bumps on the other end drew fouls. Head coach Stephanie White was diplomatic, carefully suggesting the game was called differently depending on the jersey. She didn't need to say more. The film spoke for itself. And in the end, McBride's elbow didn't just rattle Sophie Cunningham. It became the symbol of a bigger frustration, the moment that left Indiana and their fans wondering if the fight is even on equal ground anymore. But what happens when a single elbow flips the entire game upside down? Stay glued to your screen to find out. When an elbow changes the game. Kayla McBride. 13 points for Kayla McBride. Hit Sophie Cunningham with an elbow. Foul on Sophie Cunningham. What began as a routine night in Indiana quickly turned into a scene that felt less like basketball and more like a chapter pulled from a nightclub brawl. Sophie, logging career-high minutes under pressure, prided herself on the small, steady details, crisp cuts, smart defense, and a knack for quietly changing the tone of a game. To see her stagger from contact, then watch the replay shrink the moment to a mere incidental tangle, was a fresh kind of outrage. That injustice carved at the team like a cold blade, sharpening a sense of being overlooked. Rewind the tape and don't only look at the hit. Notice how the game handled it. Officials shuffled papers, gestures blinked away, and the message sent to players was as clear as it was cruel. Some actions are ignored until they become too loud to miss. For Indiana, patience didn't just evaporate, it curdled into anger. Players began to speak in clipped sentences after the final buzzer, calling for accountability, fairness, and the basic duty of protecting the bodies that make the sport possible. This isn't a demand for favors. It's a demand for consistency. Guarding lanes must be enforced the same way whether the jersey reads home or away. If the league allows double standards, trust fractures. When half a roster walks out taped and aching, the sport risks mutating into a bruising spectacle where toughness is celebrated, but safety is optional. Fans tune in for competition, not demolition derbies. Off the court, the fallout became public theater. Sophie, refusing to soften her stance, spoke plainly about officiating and the league's role in shielding players. Her voice carried a weary truth. Athletes put their bodies on the line night after night, and they deserve rules enforced with clarity, not excuses. Rumors began to sizzle. Would the league review the play? Would replay officials ever answer for the blind spots that shape games? The moment itself, an elbow, a missed call, a player who refused to be silenced, reminded everyone why oversight matters. It also showed how a single instant can tilt a season's mood, fan trust, and a team's sense of justice. In sports, as in life, the smallest gestures can reveal the biggest truths. Now the question echoes through locker rooms and boardrooms alike. Will the league choose transparency and protection, or will silence remain the easy option in the weeks ahead? So, what secret move by Sophie Cunningham is shaking up the fever like never before? Stay connected to your screen. Sophie Cunningham's explosive return shakes up the fever. Most teams, when stripped of half their rotation, would crumble under the weight of expectation. But Indiana? Indiana refused to bow. There was no panic, no surrender, just pure, raw defiance layered with heart-stopping grit. Kelsey Mitchell led the charge, delivering 26 points that felt like a heartbeat for the entire team. Every time Minnesota surged, Mitchell answered with a fury that seemed almost impossible, driving into traffic, finishing through contact, and somehow staying upright even when whistles remained silent. Without her relentless pace and sharp shooting, the Fever might not have survived past halftime. But if Mitchell was the spark, Sophie Cunningham was the unexpected flame that set the game alight. Returning after missing 4 straight, she entered the fray like a storm unleashed. Fans watching had barely unpacked her absence in their minds when Cunningham erupted for 16 points off the bench, completely rewriting the narrative. This wasn't just contributing, it was a lifeline. Thrust into chaos with no chemistry, no rhythm, and minimal time to adjust, she produced as if she had been part of Indiana's core all season. Suddenly, the bench was no longer a quiet corner. It became a battleground where the Fever proved that every player, even the temporary reinforcements, could rise and fight when the team needed them most. And it wasn't just about points. Every pass, every contested rebound, every blocked shot told the story of a squad refusing to yield. The intensity was palpable. Williams threading the needle, Cure denying the layup. It was a symphony of resilience. For 3 quarters, the energy felt almost electric, as if the court itself was charged with determination, demanding that every player match the fire Kelsey and Sophie ignited. By the final minutes, it was clear. Indiana's heart wasn't measured in rotations or box scores. It was measured in courage, in moments where the unexpected could explode into a game-changing force. And Sophie Cunningham's return? Let's just say the Fever's opponents had no idea what hit them. But what drives Aaliyah Boston and Sophie Cunningham's unstoppable grind? Find out. Stay glued to your screen. Aaliyah Boston and Sophie Cunningham's relentless grind. Aaliyah Boston continues to remind the WNBA why she is Indiana's unshakable anchor. Night after night, she absorbs punishing double teams, shoves, and relentless body contact, yet still dominates the paint with unwavering focus. Against Minnesota, her rebounding was nothing short of extraordinary, carving out second-chance opportunities for an offense that often feels like it's holding itself together by sheer will. She may not always lead the scoreboard, but her quiet consistency steadies a roster stretched thin, proving that the Fever's heart beats through her toughness. And then there's Sophie Cunningham, whose fire has the fans buzzing like never before. Just a couple of nights ago, she exploded for 23 points over 37 grueling minutes, leaving no doubt that she was ready to carry any burden the injury-riddled roster demanded. But in the latest clash, things turned tense. After taking a sharp elbow from Caleb McBride directly to her face, yet somehow being called for the foul, her frustration boiled over. It wasn't merely about one call, it was the culmination of weeks of exhaustion, playing through pain, and pushing herself to the edge every single night. That frustration pulsed through the Fever faithful too, raising questions about how much longer these players can be pushed before the grind starts to break them. Even in the chaos, magic happens on the floor. Dribble, step, shot. Aaliyah snags a rebound. Powers resets it. Another look at the basket, a fight for the rim, a foul drawn, and somehow, through sheer grit, it goes in. Moments like this define the Fever, a team that refuses to bow, even when the odds are stacked against them. Every contested possession, every physical battle, every dropped sweat-soaked jersey tells the story of a team that refuses to quit. Watching Boston anchor the paint and Cunningham ignite the offense, it's impossible not to feel the pulse of a team on the brink of something bigger. Can they maintain this intensity? Will the injuries finally take their toll, or will these Warriors continue to defy the odds, game after game? One thing is certain, the Indiana Fever may be battered, but they are far from broken, and nights like these prove why they remain one of the most compelling stories in the league today. But what impact will Caitlyn Clark's return have on the Fever's season? Keep watching. Caitlyn Clark's return could change everything. Every night, the Indiana Fever takes the court knowing it's going to be a battle. Injuries, emergency signings, and stretched rotations have turned what should be basketball into a pure test of survival. And yet, somehow, they refuse to quit. Aerial Powers, a late-season addition, has been thrust into a starring role after Sophie Cunningham went down, while other players are forced far beyond their comfort zones. It's not the smooth, polished basketball fans hope for. It's scrappy, chaotic, and exhausting. But it's working, in a way that's as thrilling as it is nerve-wracking. The spotlight, of course, keeps returning to one question. What happens when Caitlyn Clark finally returns? Even now, as Indiana clings precariously to the 8th seed, every win feels like a miracle, every basket a lifeline. The Fever's makeshift roster, patched together with sheer grit, hope, and emergency signings, has been scraping by, defying expectations. And while the results haven't been pretty, they've been enough to keep the playoff dream alive. Then came a glimpse of hope. In Minnesota, Caitlyn Clark was finally back on the practice court. Not cleared to play yet, but moving alongside her teammates, her presence alone sent shockwaves through the franchise. After weeks of watching from the sidelines, seeing her step onto the floor, even in limited reps, felt like the first real sign that Indiana's fortunes could change. This wasn't just morale. It was a tangible reminder that the cavalry was arriving. For a team battered by fatigue and injuries, that reminder couldn't have come at a better time. Every night without Clark has been a Herculean effort. Kelsey Mitchell has been forced to carry the load, grinding out 40-point nights with 10 assists, the kind of performance that keeps fans awake and heart rates elevated. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham has had to find ways to ignite late-game surges, with aerial powers stepping in unexpectedly, providing sparks that have kept Indiana competitive even against elite opponents. It's survival basketball, but also a tantalizing glimpse of what could be. If this roster, bruised and battered, can still battle contenders, imagine what a fully healthy backcourt could do. Caitlyn Clark's return could completely rewrite the narrative, turning desperation into opportunity. Indiana isn't just hoping to scrape by anymore, they're imagining the impossible. Right now, every game feels like do or die, and every player is being pushed to extremes. Yet amid the chaos, the speculation, and the gritted teeth efforts, there's a quiet excitement building. The Fever might just have enough firepower waiting in the wings to not only make the playoffs, but to shake up the league entirely. And as fans, we're left staring at the horizon, asking ourselves, when Caitlyn Clark finally takes the floor, will Indiana rise, or will the season's hard-fought survival story end in heartbreak? But what secret move is Sophie Cunningham making to revive the Fever's season? Stay glued to your screen to find out. Sophie Cunningham sparks hope. Is the Indiana Fever back on track? The clock is ticking, and for the Indiana Fever, every second feels heavier than the last. Sitting at 19-18 with just 7 games left in the regular season, the margin between survival and collapse is razor thin. Seattle, Golden State, Chicago, Los Angeles, none of these matchups are forgiving, and one cold week could shatter their playoff hopes before Sophie Cunningham even returns. The reality is stark. Patience is a luxury Indiana no longer has. Every possession, every whistle, every quarter carries the weight of the season, and yet, a spark of hope is flickering. Sophie Cunningham has been spotted on the court, participating in shoot-around ahead of the Fever's clash with the Minnesota Lynx. While she's not ready to step fully back into competitive play, her presence among teammates signals that the long-awaited return is inching closer. Coach Stephanie White has hinted as much, noting that each glimpse of Sophie in practice is a clear sign that she's on the comeback trail. Watching the Fever without Cunningham has been like trudging through mud. The offense sputters, spacing collapses, and even standout performers struggle to orchestrate plays effectively. Sure, players like Hall can catch fire, and Boston can battle in the paint, but without Sophie, the team's rhythm disappears. Hardship signings bring energy and hustle, but hustle alone can't create the order Sophie brings. Her presence stretches defenses, opens clean shots for teammates, and turns chaotic possessions into coordinated attacks. Simply put, she doesn't just add talent, she transforms the team's identity. Fans have noticed. Every warm-up clip, every controlled dribble, every subtle glance at her teammates is dissected online with feverish intensity. Social media has turned into a digital microscope, frame by frame, capturing the smallest hints of her readiness. It's a mix of anxiety and hope, because the stakes couldn't be higher. Without her, that fragile hold on the 8th seed could vanish in a single week. With her back, the Fever instantly becomes a legitimate playoff threat. No one wants to face them in a sudden death scenario. The footage speaks volumes. Chloe Peterson captured Sophie moving smoothly across the court during shoot-around, handling the ball, running plays, and engaging with her teammates. Every moment is a reassurance. She's regaining her court instincts, reconnecting with the team, and slowly rebuilding the magic that makes the Fever dangerous. Her impact goes beyond points or assists. Sophie's gravity reshapes defenses, makes Hall's cuts sharper, and turns opponents' interior positioning into a constant struggle. No temporary replacement can replicate that influence. Meanwhile, Indiana is still battling adversity on multiple fronts. Injuries and questionable officiating have tested the team's resilience, leaving players frustrated and fans vocal online. Hall's visible fury after taking an elbow, only to be penalized herself, captures the tension perfectly. The Fever are walking a tightrope, balancing recovery, strategy, and mental fortitude. But with Sophie Cunningham edging closer to a return, hope is igniting. Could this be the turning point the team and the league has been waiting for? The next few games may very well decide. So, what do you think really happened when Sophie Cunningham faced that brutal elbow? Were the WNBA refs fair, or is something bigger at play? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to comment.